open your eyes and ears and hearts to learn so much from Loretta. Loretta, I feel sure I'm good. There you are. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for joining us. I know the audience is thrilled to hear from you. And goodness knows, you have so much to share. Please let the audience know a little bit about what you shared with me about your story and how important this understanding of fear and the fear pathways and how to process and deal with that in our day-to-day lives.
Sure, good. Well, I'd like to say that it's sort of in the middle. Like a lot of times we hear about trauma, and that can seduce everyone into believing that they're a trauma victim and that they're just going to constantly feel traumatized the rest of their lives. Then
Sure.
we have the other extreme with the happy, and people expect themselves to be happy every minute. And what's wrong with me if I'm not?
Ah,
So let's think about the space in between.
right.
So everyone is born crying, and everyone wires their brain in youth. That's how our brain works. So our brain is built from this vulnerable experience of childhood.
Mm,
So we have this stereotype that children are happy, but in fact, children are full of fear.
mm,
And there's a simple biological reason. Our brain evolved to meet survival needs, but a kid can't meet their own survival needs.
of course.
So they have this fear of like, somebody's got to meet my needs for me. But then the challenge of maturing is to have confidence in our own ability to meet our own survival needs. But how can we do that? Because our brain was wired in childhood when
Mm,
we had these deep fear of not being able to meet our own needs. So
mm.
that challenge is universal. And that's a good place to start because then we don't feel like we're traumatized. We don't feel like something's wrong with us.
Right. Universal. This is fun. This is a global gathering of speakers. And through the pandemic, one of the gifts is that we are a global community, and we really are now. And this conversation, it's about all of us, every single solitary one of us born crying. So what do we do? What are some tools? Where do you go with this fear and how it comes up all day long, every day for everyone?
Yes. So, what you do is first to understand how you're creating it yourself. And the way you're creating it is with neural pathways built from past experience. So,
Mhm.
we all have billions of neurons, but it's very hard to activate a neuron unless it was developed in your past. So, anything bad that happened to you in the past built a neural pathway that turns on so easily. The natural way to think about it is imagine if you're an animal and you smell a predator when you walk in this certain direction, and the fear turns on and it wires your brain to say, oh, better not go in that direction because predators hang out there. So that's how we're wired to be. And needless to say, then we can overreact and we can fear predators when they're not there. So the
Mm,
first step is to say, oh, it's not a real threat. It's just my pathway built from a past threat. And then to say, I can build a new pathway, but it's hard because even though I have these billions of extra neurons, it's hard to activate an undeveloped neuron. So I
mm.
have to activate it over and over. And that's sort of like the cliche of telling yourself, I'm okay, when you don't really believe that you're okay. And that's why that okay feeling, you have to find a way to really believe it with positive things in your life that can help you, and then you have to repeat it.
So this building of belief in order to deal with this, there have got to be tools, reminders, because once the fear is there, it kind of takes over. So if you are not getting ready before it enters your mind and heads down that neural pathway, I mean, how do you interrupt when it's approaching all the time?
So the first thing I say, think about your fear response as a highway, and you're going to build an exit ramp. So that makes the task a little easier because it's hard to build a new highway, but an exit ramp is smaller. So
Yeah.
that's the first step. So how do you get the exit ramp? Well, first you have to notice that you're on the highway and tell yourself, I want to get off. And
Hmm.
that's very individual. Like I have a fear of X and you have a fear of Y. So each of us has very specific fears. And that's why, like, sometimes if I'm with a person and they get upset about something and it doesn't bother me at all, but then I get upset about something else. And consciously I think, oh, that's such a small thing. Why does that upset me? But it does.
Yeah.
So that's my highway and you have your highway. So whenever you find yourself like overreacting to something or reacting big and strong, you say, this is a highway I built in my past, and you search for what is that past experience that fits the pattern of what I'm reacting to today so that I know how I'm creating this over response. And once you do that, then you could say, oh, that's a highway. I want to get off that highway. But you also need to know that once those fear chemicals turn on, they last in your body for about an hour. So all of this stuff may not persuade you in that moment. So do something fun for at least a half hour and then work on your new highway.
I love that. And I love the highway and the exit ramp. And how many times have I missed an exit ramp? A lot. So I feel like you're also sharing with us the reminder to give ourselves grace when we miss the highway. In this hour of time that this is happening, just create another exit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
the practice of that,
Yes.
we will get better because it'll
Yes.
happen faster. We will acknowledge, we will be aware, acknowledge because we become aware more quickly from this practice.
Yes.
I find that it's in everything, right? These practice makes perfect, as they say. Um,
Yes.
I love that. Now, what's interesting, and like you said, your fear is X, my fear is Y. We have to create our own exit ramps, etc. Oftentimes, it seems to me that, well, I'll just speak of myself. We are judgmental of our fears because they did not come from something, like you said, some huge trauma that the whole world would agree is traumatic and horrific. Those of us that have had that, oh my goodness, and those of us that have not had such enormous trauma almost
Yes.
don't feel like we have the right to be fearful.
Yes,
And we
exactly.
we
I
don't
call that victim Olympics because a lot of
victim.
times we want to then expand our own fear creating events so that then we feel like we have the right to
Yes.
to
Yes.
play in the victim Olympics.
Yes. And the trauma wasn't so huge that when you go, you can't say, oh, this is what happened.
Yes. So the
Right
bottom
there in the
line is
ride.
that everyone starts out as a vulnerable child who's
Absolutely.
helpless and needs to depend on others. But the irony is once you get to teen years, then you get annoyed with people when they try to help you. You perceive it as control. So we look for what's the right amount. I want protection, but I don't want control. And there is no right amount because as soon as you get the protection, you get annoyed that someone's controlling you. But as soon as they don't try, then you think, oh, nobody's protecting me. That's unfortunately how the mammal brain works.
Yeah. I heard one time, and you may have shared this with me in our previous conversation, that the difference, for let's say it's a puppy dog, right? And they have a fear that subsides. A puppy dog will then rest and move on. And the difference with our brains is that we take what did or didn't even happen in this fearful moment and we never rest from it.
Yes.
How in the world do we deal with that? Because, this fear leads to anxiety, which leads to no sleep because you're thinking about it. And the exit ramp, we kept getting off, but we kept getting right back on that highway.
Sure. Well, to answer that, there's one simple word, which is prevention.
Mm,
So we think that all bad things should be prevented. And of course, some prevention is good, it's very valuable. But if you think you have to prevent every possible thing that can go wrong, then you just drive yourself insane. And a really sad example of that, in my midlife, I was divorced and I was dating, and I read a dating book and I noticed the word red flags. And
mm.
I noticed that it's used so often that everything is a red flag. Like a lot of relationships don't work out. And if you think, oh, that's a red flag, that's a red flag, then you'll never have any joy.
Right. Unbelievable. And something else you shared with me, and oh my goodness, I could ask so many questions. But one of the fears that you have really helped so many with is actually the fear of death.
Thank you. Mhm.
And I would love if you could share a little bit about that. And because I think that's very common. And I would love for those that are wondering about this to be sure they follow along and contact you about this.
Sure, thank you. So we all know that death is an inevitable, well, I should say we all know, not everyone. So death is part of life. And it's such an unpleasant thought that we try to put the thought aside, which is fine, but sometimes we put it aside in ways that actually hurt us.
Mm,
And if we know that we're doing that, that gives us the freedom to choose whether that's the right choice. So, for example, if every time something happens that reminds you of disease or the future or a relative who is ailing. These are all triggers that remind people of their own mortality. And
mhm,
many people, so everyone understands their own mortality in their teen years. That's one of the reasons teens are so grumpy, because kids can't really understand death. They don't really understand the future. Once the part of your brain that understands the future grows in adolescence, then you know that you will be gone someday and everyone will be gone someday.
mm.
And you can then sort of put yourself in a timeline of history. But that feels bad. And we've inherited a brain that panics when it sees a survival threat, because that's what it's supposed to do. Like if a gazelle smells a lion, it's supposed to panic and run. So if every time I think about my own mortality, if I panic, that's bad. So people look for, like, what else can I think of? And one person uses one bad habit, another person uses another bad habit. But whatever worked the first time when you were an adolescent, it's like, how can I avoid these bad thoughts?
Mhm.
Whatever you did, that built a big pathway in your brain, a highway, and then you keep doing that.
Mhm.
So whether it's playing a video game or a substance or getting into an argument, you're always doing that because it distracts you from bad thoughts that you don't want to have.
I'll tell you, it's very interesting. I'm grateful because that fear for me, and I think it's because I figured out my exit strategy is based upon faith and eternal life. That's, in complete respect and honor for all people's beliefs. That happens to be mine. And I often wonder, where would I be without that? I feel that there's this knowing that this will continue, right? And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for you and those with your mission to help people with these fears, because that particular fear is validated every day.
And it's accentuated by people who want to get you to worry so that you buy their solution, whatever solution they're selling.
That's right. I appreciate this more than you will know. I know the audience does. I love, I know everybody here is imagining themselves driving and all the exits that there are. I hope so much that all of us will take that visualization and incorporate it into our daily thoughts and maybe remind ourselves every time we are driving and when we see an exit, kind of take a pause and think about this in order to ingrain it into our minds a little bit more. I thank you so much. I know the audience will be thrilled. The team is dropping links and beautiful gifts that you are sharing. Your mission and your kindness and the way you help people and share is such a gift. And, in our overall arching mission of creating positive impact for individuals and unique ways and connecting people to be able to reach out to people such as yourself that they are connecting with from where they are today. I just appreciate this. It's accountability. Now we know, and the more you know, the better we can do. And with each and every one of our conversations, I want to point out that I believe that the greatest strength and courage we can share with others is to show them that it's a good thing, a smart thing, a courageous thing to reach out for help. When we get into these places, especially around fear, it causes so much of what's going on that's not positive. Thank you, Loretta. It's such a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for organizing this. It's fabulous.
Absolutely. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Take
You
care.
too.